The diner lit up before dawn, a warm orange glow bleeding out through the blinds into the still darkness. Inside, the air smelled of brewing coffee and frying bacon, laced with the faint bite of bleach from the just-mopped floor. A radio near the kitchen hummed out soft jazz, fuzzy at the edges, like it had been tuned in since the 70s and nobody dared touch it. Joe Carter pushed through the back door, letting a gust of winter air curl in around his ankles. 85, with a spine that had long since accepted a permanent curve, he moved slow but deliberate. His steps were steady. His uniform was starched, clean tucked. Every motion of his hands was practiced, efficient, tying his apron, folding napkins, checking salt shakers. He was the first one in, always. Morning, legend, called Carlos, the line cook, without looking up from his eggs. Joe gave a small grunt. That passed for a hello, snow's comin'. You see the forecast. Forecast says a lot of things, Joe replied, inspecting the ketchup bottles like a surgeon. Carlos laughed, flipping a pan. Man, if I hit 85 and still make it here before the sun, someone better check I'm not a ghost. Joe didn't respond. He was at the coffee machine now, loading the filter. The smell bloomed immediately, rich, bitter, real. He served the first customer an hour later. A waitress called in sick, so Joe picked up the tables without a word. He shuffled between booths with a half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. He knew how each regular took their eggs. He remembered whose kid got into college, who lost their job, who brought in the baby picture last Thursday. He didn't talk much, but people talked to him. Like you do with furniture you love. Between refills, he glanced at the clock. 8:40. His hand went to his shirt pocket, pulling out the photo like muscle memory. Evelyn. 58 years together, now recovering at home, still weak, still waiting. Her smile in that photo was before the surgery, before the bills. He kissed the corner and slipped it back. The bell above the front door jingled. A man stepped in, tall, neat hair, long coat dusted with snow. Something about him was too clean. He took a booth in the back. Ordered coffee black. No sugar, no food. Watched everything. Joe caught the man's gaze once mid-pour. The stranger gave a small nod. Joe nodded back, then returned to wiping a table, elbow aching more than usual. Extra syrup today? The young mother at table 3 asked. Joe gave her a second bottle. Your boy's still eatin' like he's got a hollow leg? She laughed, embarrassed. Yeah. He moved on. An hour later, he crouched to tighten a loose table leg. Took longer to get up. The stranger noticed that too. Hey, old-timer, Carlos said after the rush. Take 5. I got it. Joe leaned on the counter. Takes more energy sitting down. Carlos shook his head, flipped a pancake. You're like a wise kung fu janitor, you know that? You talk too much. At the end of the shift, everyone else had gone. Even Carlos, who usually lingered. Joe stayed behind, slow dancing with the mop. The buzz of the overhead lights was the only sound. He worked in rhythm. Swish. Pause. Swish. The silence stretched. His legs trembled slightly. He ignored it. Outside, snow had started falling. He finished the last booth, cleaned the counter, checked the register wasn't left open, then pulled on his coat. On his way out, he passed by the booth where the stranger had Saturday. The coffee cup was empty. A $10 bill sat folded beneath it, crisp, deliberate. Joe paused. A small note was written on the napkin beside it. People notice. He looked out the window. The man stood across the street, lit by the flicker of a faulty street lamp. Snow swirled around his shoulders. He turned, disappearing into the dark like he'd never been there at all. Joe stared a moment longer, then turned off the lights and locked the door behind him. He showed up again the next day. Same coat, same quiet presence. This time, he didn't take a booth. He walked right into the kitchen. Name's Daniel, he said. Looking for work. The manager shrugged, short-staffed. Can you scrub a dish? Daniel nodded. His handshake was soft but steady. He was given a stained apron and pointed toward the sinks. Joe noticed the shoes first. Too polished. Not dishwasher shoes. No creases on the soles. He said nothing. Daniel fumbled with the racks, soaked his sleeves, splashed more water than he saved. Joe walked by and reset the machine with a flick of his fingers. You're flooding the damn floor. Sorry. New to this. Joe gave a slight grunt, then handed him a pair of gloves. By noon, Daniel had dropped 2 plates and burned his hand on a steam jet. Joe covered for him, working faster, quieter. Not once did he snap. He just filled in the gaps and kept the rhythm. You ever worked in a kitchen before? Joe asked at the end of shift. Not exactly. You're not built for it. Maybe that's why I need it. Joe squinted at him for a moment, then turned away. Later that week, Daniel was still trailing behind, awkward but watching. Every time Joe picked up a broom or cleared a table, Daniel noticed the precision. Nothing wasted, no motion extra. "You ever think about quitting?" Daniel asked once, scraping pans. "No, why not? Can't afford to." "Your age, though." Joe stopped wiping the counter. He looked up, eyes sharper than usual. "You asking 'cause you care, or 'cause you're writing a book?" Daniel held his gaze. "Because people your age usually have something better to do." "I do. Keeping someone alive." It was the first thing he said about Evelyn. Daniel didn't ask again. 2 days later, the tip jar was left open on the counter. End of the night. Register empty. Everyone gone. Joe walked past it. Stopped. Looked around. The place was dead quiet. Outside, wind shoved against the windows. He reached into the jar. Took out a wad of crumpled bills. Daniel, hidden by the kitchen swing door, leaned in slightly. Joe counted. Then stuffed it all into a sealed envelope, scrawled Anita, rent on the front, and left it under the register drawer. Daniel watched, unmoving. Next day, Anita cried when she found the envelope. Nobody said anything, but Carlos shot a knowing look at Joe, who was slicing lemons like it had nothing to do with him. That afternoon, Daniel walked out back during the smoke break. Snow falling again. Joe stood near the dumpster, coat zipped up to his chin, blowing steam into the cold. "You always like this?" Daniel asked. Joe took a drag, didn't answer. "You do more than your share. You give when no one's looking." "Why?" Joe exhaled slowly. The smoke curled up into the dark. "Because no one gave a damn when I needed it. I remember what that felt like. You could take more. You could leave. I stay because promises don't keep themselves." "Your wife?" Joe nodded. 58 years. I held her hand through 2 strokes, 3 surgeries. The last one nearly took her. She told me, "Don't sell the house." And I told her, "Then I'll work till the sun forgets how to rise." Silence settled between them. Daniel rubbed his hands together, like he wasn't used to real cold. "You ever think about what you've missed?" "Yeah," Joe said. "But I count what I still have." The next week passed in a quiet rhythm. Joe started letting Daniel help more. Gave fewer corrections. Sometimes they sat in the break room with bad coffee and worse chairs and just breathed in the warmth of the space. Carlos and Anita whispered behind the counter one morning. "He needs to stop," she said. "He's got no business bussing tables at his age." "He won't let anyone help," Carlos replied. "You know he fixed the leak under the fryer? On his back in the grease. He needs to go home." "He is home." That night, Joe dropped a tray in the freezer. When he bent to pick it up, his knee gave. He didn't cry out, just sat there a minute, surrounded by frozen mist and cold boxes of fries. His hands shook. His breath came in short bursts. No one saw. Except Daniel. He stood at the door unmoving, then quietly stepped away and let the old man have his moment alone. Later, as they locked up, Daniel handed Joe a scarf. "Worn thick. It's getting colder." Joe took it without a word. The lines on his face looked deeper. Daniel stared at him. "Why do you think no one else helps like you do?" Joe considered it. Maybe they never learned how. Maybe no one ever helped them. Maybe they think kindness is something you give when you've got extra. He paused at the door. "But it's the only thing worth giving when you don't." Daniel stood alone in the closed diner long after Joe left. The lights flickered. He looked down at the dish sink. His reflection in the steel wasn't who he used to be. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was being changed. The staff was told to arrive early, no questions asked. The manager straightened his tie twice. The lights were turned up brighter than usual. Booths polished. No grease on the floor. Joe arrived 10 minutes before open, like always. Same coat. Same soft grunt of greeting. But something felt off. Carlos looked nervous. Anita kept glancing toward the office. Then the man from the dish pit, Daniel, stepped out. No apron. No stains. Clean suit, pressed shirt, leather shoes that finally made sense. Joe froze. One long look. Not angry. Not surprised. Just tired. Daniel stepped closer. "My name is Daniel Thompson, CEO of Haven Street Diners. I've been working here the past 3 weeks. Undercover." No one moved as he turned toward Joe. And I've never met anyone like this man. Silence. A few gasps. Someone dropped a spoon. Joe Carter, Daniel continued, voice steady, came to work every day not out of habit, but out of love. He made this diner better. Not through strategy, but through service. Not through ambition, but through honor. He didn't ask for recognition. He refused help. And he never once complained. Joe looked away. You're embarrassing yourself. Daniel smiled. Maybe, but you've earned it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. No flourish. Just a white envelope, thick and quiet. Joe didn't take it. Daniel opened it. $175,000. That's enough to clear the medical debt, cover the mortgage, and give Evelyn the recovery time she deserves. Joe blinked. I know you didn't do this for reward, but that's exactly why you should accept it. Joe's hands stayed still. For a full minute, no one said a word. Then Anita stepped forward, put a hand on his shoulder. Take it, Joe. Please. He took the envelope slowly, like it might shatter in his hands. His eyes brimmed but didn't spill. He nodded once barely. There's more, Daniel added. We've created a new employee relief fund, named the Carter Fund, in honor of you and your wife, for anyone who falls behind, so no one has to choose between a shift and a surgery again. The diner clapped. Quiet at first, then louder, full and real. Joe didn't say much, just turned to Carlos and muttered, Well, guess I'm finally off Tuesday mornings. That afternoon, a local news crew came by. Joe didn't say much on camera, just that his wife made better coffee than the diner ever had, and he'd like to get home before she figured that out again. They filmed him walking out with Daniel beside him, snow starting to fall. His steps were slower, but somehow lighter. The next few days changed everything. A mural appeared on the alley wall. Joe in his apron, mop in hand, standing beside a steam cloud rising from a coffee cup. Above it, work honest. Love loud. Evelyn sat in a wheelchair by the diner window 3 days later. Pink scarf around her neck, face pale but glowing. Customers brought flowers. One child handed her a crayon drawing labeled Mr. Joe Hero. He hung it by the register. Joe retired that Friday. Didn't make a speech. Just clocked out, nodded at the time card machine, and left through the back one last time. But every morning after that, he still came in. Just for coffee. Sat by the window. Watched the new kids hustle. Gave quiet tips without asking. Sometimes helped Carlos prep eggs. Sometimes just read the paper. Daniel visited twice a month. They didn't talk much. Just drank coffee and watched the snow pile up outside the window. The scarf Daniel had given him was now Evelyn's favorite. One morning, Anita slid a fresh cup across the counter and said, You gonna stop coming one day? Joe sipped. Smiled. Already did. Now I just live here. The sun pushed through the blinds, lighting the counter gold. He reached into his pocket. Pulled out the photo. Evelyn, before the hospital. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked around. The booths. The chipped plates. The smell of cinnamon and grease. The clatter. The laughter. I kept the promise, he said softly. Anita, drying glasses nearby, turned. What promise? Joe smiled. I missed it. All of them.